Hi, boys and girls. We are back with another Wonders reading lesson. Today, we are going to read the story Gary the Dreamer by Gary Soto. This text is a narrative nonfiction. That's the genre. The word genre is means the type of story it is, and this genre of this text is narrative nonfiction. The word narrative means story. The word nonfiction means not fake. If we just had the word fiction, fiction means made up, that it's fake. But since this word part non is in the front of this word, it means that it's not fake. So, this story, more specifically, we would call an autobiography because Gary Soto, the author, is writing about himself. So a biography is a writing about a person, and if it's an autobiography, it means it's written by the and if it's an autobiography, that means the author is writing about themselves. All right, let's get started. This week's essential question. All right, let's get started. This week's essential question is: how do people from different cultures contribute to a community? Read about the poet and author Gary Soto. Find out about Gary's culture and his community. So, we're going to like the okay. So, let's get started. I'm going to have the text read I'm going to have the text read aloud, and then I'll pause in between and ask some questions throughout the story. So make sure that you're doing your best to listen carefully so that you can answer the questions along the way.
Gary the Dreamer by Gary Soto. Illustrated by Elizabeth Gomez. I was born in April, a month when it rains and rains. Maybe this is why when I was 3 years old, I liked to open my mouth and taste rain. Also, April is when flowers bloom. Bees arrive out of nowhere. I lived in a small white house. My dog's name was Blackie. My cat's name was Boots. I had a canary just bigger than a big person's thumb. But my bird flew away when the little door of its cage was left open. So sorry, little canary, but I think it was me who left it open.
I really like how the illustrator, the person who makes the pictures in the story, I like how she is depicting everything the author is saying in her illustrations. You see his cat and his dog and Gary out in the rain. Let's continue reading.
I remember my high chair. I remember watching my parents and older brother at the dinner table. When I got a little bigger, I got to sit with them. Most mornings I ate oatmeal sprinkled with brown sugar. The sugar was like rocket energy. I blasted out of the house ready to play. I played tag with the neighbor kids. I played hide and seek. I played catch with oranges. In our backyard we had an orange tree. We also had plum, lemon, and apple trees. Lucky me. Any time I was hungry for a snack, I just went outside and picked a fruit.
So, what did Gary like to do when he was a little boy? So, what did Gary like to do when he was a little boy?
I didn't have many toys. My army men were pinto beans and pebbles. I played with them in the dirt. I got dirty from playing hard. It seemed like a giant pepper shaker had sprinkled me with dust. My favorite fruit was watermelon. After I ate a slice of watermelon, I ended up with seeds in my mouth. These seeds were my ammo to spit at my older brother. He would spit some back at me. It was sort of like a fun war. The seeds flew all over the place.
As they were reading, I paused to ask myself questions to check my understanding, which is really good when you're reading a story to ask yourself these questions so that you can make sure that you're understanding what's being read. If you don't understand something, it's always good to go back and reread parts just to help you get a clearer understanding. One of the questions I asked myself is, why did Gary use pinto beans and pebbles as his army men? Well, if I go back and I reread, I read that Gary didn't have a lot of toys. That is why he used things like beans and pebbles as toys. He was getting creative. He couldn't get the toys, couldn't afford them, then he could use his imagination and use things that he did have. Something else that stuck out to me as the story was being read was this word watermelon. The other day we talked about compound words, how they're two smaller words put together to make one new big word. Here I see the word part water and the second word part melon. You put them together and you get watermelon.
In kindergarten, I learned my colors. I learned to tie my shoes and to be nice. I liked to sing, too. My brother said he could hear me from the next classroom. I made my first friend, Daryl. I made another friend, Jose. At recess, we went on the slide. It was like a big shiny spoon and slippery. Then we went on the swings. It was scary but fun going high and jumping out. Then we went on the monkey bars. If I fell, I never got hurt.
What did Gary learn in kindergarten?
In first grade, I practiced writing the alphabet. The letters were big and blocky. I wrote my name, Gary. Some days my nice teacher would have to tell me, Gary, sit still. I wiggled a lot in my chair. I dreamed a lot. I was busy looking at the floor or my hands or out the window. Wow, could that be my canary in the tree?
What did Gary practice in first grade?
I couldn't pronounce some words. I couldn't say sandwich. I would say Sammy. I knew that 2 plus 2 was 4. But what was 5 plus 7? I counted out my answer on my fingers, sticky from the peanut butter and jam inside my Sammy. In second grade, we collected money to help children in Africa. They didn't have anything to eat. I collected pennies, lots of pennies. I noticed that the pennies were the same as me. You see, I was naturally brown, and even browner from running in the sun. I felt like I was giving poor Africa a piece of me. My classmates got taller, but I seemed to stay the same size. I still liked playing at recess. I liked dodgeball, kickball, and foursquare. I would tumble when I played soccer. I was quick. I admire people who are quick and who play fair.
So, as I read this paragraph down here, and he's talking about his friends and how he used to play, I'm gonna make an inference. Now, an inference is when you take what you know in your brain and then what you read in the book and you put them together and you make up a new idea, a new thought. When I'm in the classroom, I like to put one of my hands on my head and the other hand on the book, and I bring my two hands together and I interlock my fingers and I say, let's make an inference sandwich. We're making a new idea, putting those two things together. So I can inference by this paragraph that Gary is not very tall. The text says that his classmates grew taller, but he seems to stay the same. So Gary must be a little on the short side.
By third grade, I was a good reader. I loved picture books. The pages were bright and colorful as toucans, those tropical birds with long beaks. Every week I went to the public library. I checked out mountains of books. I was still a dreamer. Sometimes I watched ants going in and out of their holes, or I would watch water racing in the curb. The river of water carried matchsticks, leaves, gum wrappers, and those poor little ants. I rescued some of those ants. I put them carefully on my finger and set them on the cement curb. They lay for a while like weak little shadows. Then they woke up and staggered away.
What does Gary do in second grade? What is Gary like in third grade?
It was fun in third grade. I still stayed small, like those ants, I guess. I was scared of math, poor me. But reading was what I really liked. I read on the couch. I read in bed with carrot sticks, like pencils in my hands.
So I'm going to check my comprehension again, see if I am understanding everything. So, a question I asked myself was, what was Gary like in third grade? To answer it, I read page 18. Gary stayed small, he liked reading, and was scared of math. He read everywhere he could. So, he preferred reading over math. Some of you might prefer math over reading, or you might like them both equally.
I liked to read in my favorite tree. Once, when Boots came by, I tossed a piece of bark at him. He looked around and meowed. I giggled. I tossed another piece of bark at him. This time, Boots saw me and climbed up the tree. We sat on a fat limb, the two of us. I read him a story about a bird. He licked his paws. The engine inside him began to purr. I guess Boots liked reading too.
So, boys and girls, what the author did here was very neat. He used the skill visualizing to help us see what he meant. Even if we didn't have the illustrator to provide pictures, when he writes, uses these words to write, the engine inside him began to purr. I can visualize in my brain, I can see pictures in my brain, kind of like a mind movie of a cat that has a really loud purr, so much that it's almost like an engine inside of him. That's a really neat skill that you, as a writer, and other authors can use to make their writing more interesting. And as a reader, you can use those words to visualize and get those mind movies going in your brain.
On weekends, my family went to Chinatown. We bought groceries there at the Mexican store. I remember mariachis roving the street. Their sombreros were huge. You couldn't see their eyes, only their hanging mustaches. Their trumpets blared, the guitars strummed. Their violins seemed to weep. The guitarron thumped deeply. One time, I saw a dog dance to the mariachi music. The dog went back and forth, like he was doing the cha-cha. Every night I took a bubble bath in our deep tub. The water roared from the faucet as I climbed in. The bubbles rose like mountains. No, like really pretty clouds. I scooped up the bubbles and patted them onto my face. I pretended that I had a beard. I placed some of the bubbles on my head. Oh, a sombrero. I was a dreamer. I was sometimes in another world. In bed, I covered myself with 2 blankets. I thought about the day before I fell asleep, so tired. My legs kicked. As I dreamed, I was running for a touchdown, and the whole school was watching me. Gary Soto grew up to be an author. He dreamed up ideas for more than 40 books for children and grown-ups. He shares his Mexican-American culture through his poems and stories.
So, what happens when Gary grows up? Let's take a look and listen about the author and illustrators.
About the author and illustrator. Gary Soto may be a dreamer, but he is also a reader. He says, I don't have much of a life because my nose is often stuck in a book. But I discovered that reading builds a life inside the mind. I enjoy biographies and novels and reading in Spanish. He also likes theater, sports, and traveling. Gary is an award-winning author of more than 40 books for children and grown-ups. Elizabeth Gomez is a well-known painter and book illustrator. Her dreamy paintings shine with lovely colors. In everything I paint, she says, there are always people, animals, plants, and beauty. Elizabeth also helps people paint murals on school walls. She says that she loves to see a plain wall become a little gem. Author's purpose. Why do you think the author called himself a dreamer?
So, boys and girls, you can see in this excerpt about the author, they provide a real photo of him, and that's really neat. We can see what the author looks like, and we also have a photo of the illustrator. Boys and girls, I hope you liked this story. I do want you to think about, why do you think the author called himself a dreamer? And boys and girls, as I leave you with this, I hope you have enjoyed this lesson. And boys and girls, I hope you have enjoyed this lesson. And until next time, bye for now.